Hi, this is Jim Janossy. This is your preview for Chapter 24 of The Story of Art by Ernst Gombrich. In this chapter, we're going to take a look at England, America, and France in the late 1700s and early 1800s. It's a very interesting era. This, of course, is the era of the American Revolution, but also the French Revolution. We're going to take a look, first of all, at how people who commissioned buildings started to get the strange idea. And of course, we wouldn't consider it strange today, but it might have been strange at the time that they could pick the style of the building they wanted. So you see some examples here of a building that's done in the Gothic style, and you see some buildings done in a very refined style of the Greek architecture, but in fact, kind of a rediscovery of what Greek architecture really did look like. It turns out Palladio had looked at some not very good examples in the Renaissance, and a lot of what people had thought were true to form Greek types of components of buildings turned out not to be so. We're going to see a type of painting pioneered by John Copley called historical painting, which is somewhat similar to what William Hogarth had come up with, a moralistic series of paintings, except here the artist would research a historical event and attempt to picture it in a way that was very realistic, according to whatever facts he could muster, as to how that scene looked sometime in the past. Since photography hadn't been invented yet, this was about the only way, aside from your own imagination, that people might be able to picture a historical scene. We also take a look at a painting, The Death of Marat, by Dahvi. This painting, tied in with the French Revolution, is very noteworthy because it was done in a way that idealized this man's corpse and turned him into a martyr for the cause, similar to the way that the body of Jesus was beautified by artists in the Renaissance. But Gombrich entitles this chapter A Break in Tradition, and that's actually what's occurring here, because artists at this point started to branch out. They started to experiment with the composition of paintings in ways that had not been accepted in the past. And some artists, such as William Blake, branched out in such strange ways that their work really wasn't accepted until much, much later. And you'll see an example of that, very interesting one, towards the end of this chapter. The break in tradition that Gombrich is pointing to occurs later in the 1800s, when the very conservative classical painting of the Academy is challenged. I think it's challenged in a way that stems from the development of photography. Once the camera was invented and a process was invented to capture an image, questions started to come up as to why was an artist necessary to create this type of detail if the point was simply to render something that was as detailed as what the camera could produce. And at that point, it combined with an influence that had always been present, the naturalistic school of thought, that things should be painted in a way that represented reality, but a reality as seen with the eyes, and a reality as interpreted by the artist, not a beautification of things according to some classical ideas that this is the way one must do it. So what we're going to see is a branching off into various strains of thought in the 1800s, and in the final chapter, in chapter 25, we're going to see where that leads to in terms of Impressionism. But because photography is so intimately involved with developments in art in the 1800s, I'm having you also do a little bit of reading into a color photography process that predated the kind of color photography that exists in the modern world. It's called autochromes, and it was a very interesting process that combines what you've already learned about the combination of different colors of light to create a raft of other colors, and it does it in a way that's really pretty clever, a way that made possible the production of some very beautiful color pictures, even as early as 1905, which is really a very long time ago for fine color photography to have existed. So I'm going to have you do a little reading about that, and I hope you explore the website, in particular, the one where you click on the man standing next to a bunch of potatoes, because those potatoes have a lot to do with the type of color photography that became possible with autochromes.